Midterm exam coming Tuesday. It will cover up to today's lecture. Okay, so I cannot remember whole the chapter number, but it will cover up to now. Then we will have the final exam. Final exam will not be comprehensive. It will be after the midterm exam. And also the exam format is the maximum will be 100 and half of them, sometimes 40%, sometimes 50%, half of them will be multiple choice and the other half will be the answer. Describe the answer, and the difficulty level, it will be just the middle, the intermediate, not even the intermediate. I think the quite easy. So if you attend the class, probably you can answer easily most of the question. Okay? And only distance learning student will have a chance to take the remote exam. So as I emailed, is there any distance learning student here? Okay. So all of you should be here to take the exam. The exam hour is the same as the class hour. So it will be 1:30 to 2:45 on Tuesday next week. Any questions regarding to the midterm exam? Okay. And on the final grade, the midterm will be 20% or the 25% around that. Okay. Also, that's pretty much the first. And the second announcement is that I already extend the project A due to the end of this month, so March 31st, I think that is a Sunday. So you have a time because of I didn't think about the midterm exam date. So right after the midterm exam, so I extend the due date for the first project. First project is nothing but the implementation of the trigger, which is based on the PL/SQL that satisfy with the condition. It's a bunch of condition, but it's not very complicated. But this is for the temporary trigger. If you have any question regarding to the project, first why don't you contact the GA, and GA will explain details about the implementation. Okay. When GA grade your submission, the project, GA will run your submission as it is. Okay. Do not modify, do not editing. So you don't have to copy and paste to the MS Word file. Okay. You can submit the SQL file as it is. Then the GA will run your SQL as it is. If you run it correctly, then you will get the point. Otherwise, it will be deducted. And the second project, we have a chance after we complete the database programming lecture and the exercise lab. I will explain details about the second project. Second project will be more difficult and intensive job required. So it will be the group project by two. So if you want to do by yourself, it can be individual. Otherwise, if you want, set up the team. So when you submit the project, you can specify your group, the member. Okay, you don't have to inform before you submit it. Okay, so right now it's a good idea to find your colleagues or the friend regarding to the second project. Okay, and any question?
For project
yes,
B,
project
we
A.
can individual, project B.
Project B.
We can do it like by ourselves.
Yes, it can be individual. If you want to form a team, or you can form a team by two, maximum 2 people. Okay.
Maximum 2.
Yes. I don't think you need 3 or 4 to do the project B. Okay. But I will explain the details about the project B after we finish the project A. Okay? But if you already finished, I think that some of you guys already finished the project A, you can start project B. If you do the lecture today and Thursday the exercise lab, I think you should be able to start project B. Project B is the implementation of kind of the dynamic SQL. You are mimicking the SQL Plus. But there's a menu-driven SQL Plus. Okay. Unless there is a question, I will check your attendance because it has been a long time to call your name. Abdullah,
Yes.
Bharat Kumar?
Yes.
Okay. Saras Chandra? No? Riyad? Bandar?
Yes.
Abarkhani? Okay, good. Sadhu? Albogami? The Sultan? Albogami? Dema? Dema Adho Baiban? No? Aris? Agathani? Ibrahim? Ibrahim Algamdi? Algamdi? No? Maynard?
Here.
Pfizer? Pfizer Alkardi? No? Wafa? Raza? Raza Abuhamadi? No? Hatem? Yes. Faisal? No. Abdul Rahman? Yes. How about? How? No. You hang? Okay. Yan Chen? Yan Chen? Fang Ying Ding? Fang Ying Ding? Abu Baker? Abu Baker? Tian Shu Gao? Tian Shu Gao? Su Li? Xiun Li? Hang Yuan Liu? Mohammed Madi? Okay. Didier? Leini? Nyerti Noi? Zibo Chu? Bei Xiang Ren? Tui Wang? Yang Wei Yan? Chao Yin? Junji Jiang? Walid? Yi Shen? Okay. Wen Yui Hu? Sidi Son Kalaya? Hua Feng Wang? Jing Lui Wu? If your name is not called or was late, you can check that sometime. Okay, so I think that you already got the experience on the part of the database programming on the exercise lab before the spring break. Somebody says it's not spring break, winter break because of the snow. It's not worse than the couple of years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, there were back to back the huge snow piles, so even I cleaned up the snow on my roof. It was very dangerous at the time. But this year, I think we got the huge snow one time, sandy snowstorm. But that is actually better than I think the one time we got the snowstorm on October. It's a year ago? Last year. Yeah, that's much more dangerous in my house especially because we got a lot of down trees and the branches. So and also it's a very watery snow. So it's a very, very heavy, even very hard to clean up. But during the sandy, for me, I didn't have any problem. But anyway, so you got the experience in the database programming, especially the PL/SQL part. The PL/SQL stands for Procedural Language for Structured Query Language. As we discussed before, what is a language, by the way? I keep asking, what is the language, programming language? Yeah, machine, right. So just like you and me, we are communicating through the common language. Even worse in the machine and human being. Machine cannot understand what Professor Lee is saying. Even I cannot understand how to use the computer, even though I major in the computer sciences. If somebody give the computer stuff, just the machine, I cannot use that. It's just the machine itself. So we should have the common thing. It's a media. That is the media, and especially it's the program language. That should be based on what? The linguistic, or the Chinese, or something English? No. It should be based on
Machine.
data structure. Okay? Computer can understand only structured data. Why? Because the computer is based on binary information. Binary information means 0 or 1 combination. Sequence of 0 or 1 combination. So it's a very simple 0 or 1, turn it on, turn it off. So we need to make more complicated. How can we utilize a 0 or 1 binary data to represent the complicated data? We need to make the format. Format is the structure. Okay? Like the, do you know the Morse, the code? So you can use it. Don't. It's a combination. It's a structure. There's a rule and the format. So we can make using the two data, we can make any information, Morse code. Similarly, we can make something language using the data structure. It's a format. It can be called the algorithm, whatever. Then that is the program language. Okay. However, computer can understand only very, very low level program language, which is what? Machine learning? Binary? It's kind of instruction. Okay? So if assembly language, assembler, if you are coming from the computer engineering, you already did. I think the undergraduate student, you already did, right? The instruction is just the add for certain register to other register. It's a basic language. It's a machine language. So computer can understand, utilize such a thing, but problem is human being cannot use this directly, such a machine language. So we need what? Some high-level language, which is similar to our natural language. That is called high-level language, such as C, C++, Java. Most of the language that you know is high-level language. Sometimes you need to learn such a low-level machine language directly, especially for the firmware coding or such a stuff. So we have we learn the Java language, object-oriented language. Object-oriented language is based on object-oriented concept or object-oriented data structure. Okay? Among them, in our class, database class, we have learned specific data structure. For what? Managing very large data. That is relational database model. So we should have different languages. Can we use the Java language for the database management? No, cannot. Java language is not for database. It's not based on relational database model. It's totally different model, totally different concept, totally different species. Okay? Just like the elephant cannot understand what the human being is saying because it's totally different species. Origins are different. Just like that, Java language or the ASP.NET and the C++, their language is not for database. Origins are different. So we learn about the structured query language, which is based on database model. Okay? So for example, the select from where, something like that. So we can access the data modeled by relational database model. You should be able to, because you already took my lecture and also you complete the exercise lab. So you can access the data using some software given by the DBMS. DBMS is a software. It's a company, software company, who'd like to sell and who'd like to make the money for the database management. So for example, Oracle. So using Oracle, you can access the database. Also, you can create the database, create table, whatever. Okay. However, nowadays, so for example, the personal computer, laptop, or even the smartphone and any computer device, is there any application without the graphical user interface? No, most of them are supporting graphical user interface. Can database language, SQL, support graphical user interface? No, there's no functionality. The SQL is only for accessing the data in relational database mode. That's it. Okay? Well, and also, I have the policy. If the student midterm exam is higher than 90, I will give A. And if the student score is below 90 and above 80 is a B, and the other will be fail. That's my rule. So can I implement such a procedure part or condition in the SQL? No. Actually, yes. But generally, no. It's a very complicated procedure. However, in other database and the programming language such as C, C++, Java, ASP.NET, and any language, it's very easy. If then else, then for loop, while loop, then you can do any condition, you can implement any condition and any procedure. Okay? So, database language is good for to access the data in relational model. However, there are shortcomings, such as no graphical user interface. Second, no procedural implementation. Yes, there exists actually a little bit, but that's the additional feature. So let's say there is no the procedural part. So it's very hard to implement such a thing. So that is a reason for the database system. Database system means we build a database. So we have computer stuff. So we try to access the data using SQL. However, for better implementation of your application, we need to get fancy, nice graphical user interface and more procedural part, but SQL cannot support such a thing. So why don't we add help of other program languages, such as C, C++, COBOL, and ASP.NET, any other program language. So this is called database programming. So we are going to use general program language. It's a host. Sometimes it's called a host language. Except accessing the database. In case you need to access the data in database, at that time we will use SQL, database query language, with host language. This is called database programming. Always, this is the only way. Combination of SQL and other programming language is the only way to implement database language. Sometimes you forget whether there exists the SQL part when you are using host language. The reason is that SQL is sometimes complicated for those who do not have knowledge on the database. We have spent almost 2 months to understand the SQL, relational database model only. But for those who do not have database experience, they cannot use the relational database system. To address that problem, sometimes host program language provide some nice interface, like the API. Okay? Then this API includes SQL. So you don't know what's going on inside. Just call the API library. Sometimes it can be provided as object. So it has just a class. So you don't know how the database is working or SQL is implemented. Just hide inside object or API. At that time, you can just call the object or component. Okay? However, if you take a look at inside of this component and object, there exists the SQL part to access data. SQL is the only way to access the relational database. Okay, there's no other way. The reason is that database and other programs, they are totally different concept, totally different data structure. Okay, that is the reason database programming sometimes causes the problem. You need to understand both database part and programming part, and also you need to combine, integrate in your program. However, just like the sister and brother, they are keep fighting. So I have one daughter, she is 12 years old, and my son is 7 years old. They are keep fighting because their origin are totally different, male and female, fighting every time. It's not possible to plan. They're very nice. So just like that, database cannot be mixed with the most program language. However, there exists the nice interface like the API, object-oriented object, to hide kind of encapsulation, to hide the difficulty of the SQL. So in this class, I'm going to explain about the more low level, which means not hide inside. I'd like to show how the data programming is working. Okay? There are different approaches. First, embedded command. Embedded, what does embedded mean? Inside, plug in, right? Embedded means it's a plug-in. So, for example, let me use the C programming. So, in the C programming, I'd like to add 1 through 10, sum of 1 through 10. So first, you should have a main function, right? Definitely, you should have include some other library. If you have or the header information, then main function is like that. This is the main function. First process when you run, okay? When you compile and run this program, this main function will be called the first time. That is the reason it's called the main function, right? Then, in the main function, we have integer I, then I is 1, then for loop, and j is 1. You can use the for loop directly. Integer I, let's say, make it more complicated. Then, j is I to 10, and sum plus j, whatever. Then print sum. This is a very simplified the C program to sum up 1 through 10. Okay. At this time, you can compile using what? Compiler. What is a compiler, by the way?
To change the high-level language to the machine language.
So low-level language does not have the compiler. Even low-level language has a compiler. What is a compiler? Compiler is a program, software, just like the MS Word and any other application program. But it's specialized for what? Transfer high-level language or such a language into machine language or instruction. So final output of the compile program is executable file, which means it's a series of instruction, bunch of instruction. Okay? So you can compile and run. What does that mean, running? Executing. Load what?
Load by the operating system and do the instruction as before.
You forgot the key point. What happened when you run the program? Any computer, any device, what happened?
Programming is loaded to
Execute the instruction.
Execute the instruction. Then what does that mean? What happened when you want to
Or the procedure to follow or procedure that.
So when you compile this one, so this is A.C file. So A.C file will be A file, the executable file. Then, where is it? Result. Where is it?
in the hard disk.
Hard disk drive.
Yeah,
Then you double click. What run this one? What happened?
loaded in
Load
the memory.
into the memory. That means the executing. What run? So when you run this one, it's compiled. It's a bunch of instruction like the add, whatever. This is on the hard disk drive. When you run it, it will be loaded into the memory. That is called what? That's process.
Process.
Then processor will work instruction by instruction. Coordinate by what? Scheduler. Scheduler will pick. Because CPU can run only one instruction at a time. One program. But you like the multitasking. So you run multi-program, same time. How can we share? Scheduler will pick, when scheduler pick this one, then instruction will be loaded into the copy into the CPU, registered by address. Then CPU will execute instruction by instruction. How fast? If you are using 1.6 gigahertz CPU, 1.6 gigatimes fast. That is the computer architecture and operating system. Then that's the general thing that you know. Okay, I believe you know everything. This time, I do not know the data I. Without database, there is no problem to use the data. But this time I decide to get the one data value of I from database, especially relational database. There is a ABC table, test table. And there is a data for Lee. Initial value is 1. It's a column initial. So I try to access this one. Get this data, then feed on this program. So I know how to use the SQL. So select the initial value from the test data. The name, where name is Lee. Then compile. Can it be compiled? Definitely not. C compiler, for example, CC or GCC, Turbo C, they may not know how to handle this one. This is different language. Okay? So in my transcript, if I plug in the Arabic language in the middle, I definitely cannot understand what it is saying. Okay, just like that. Even though you know the SQL, you know the host language, if so you write down the SQL part instead of integer I, but the compiler cannot understand. Compiler cannot compile it. So to address that problem in database language, this part should be blocked. Okay, so like the EXEC SQL, EXEC SQL begin, and EXEC SQL end. First, compile only red block, EXEC SQL block. This is called the SQL block. This part, compile it. That's not a host language compiler. That's not a C compiler. That is called pre-compiling. Pre-compiling means compile only this part into host languages. In this case, C language. Okay? Somebody may be curious. Is a SQL based on the C language? Yes. Actually, if you open the Oracle database, 80% are implemented by C and C++. The other 20% are assembly language. Okay? So actually, it is coded by C. So it's not a big deal to change this one into the C. However, this code, very, very hard to understand. Okay? Very, very low level library. So this one will be converted into the C language that is called a precompiler first. Then finally you have the pure C language. Then compile, C compile again. Then you have executable file. When you execute this one, this time you can access the data, then complete the program. This is called embedded approach. So you can embed the SQL part into the host language. The problem is there are two different languages in one program. So you first precompile the SQL block first. Who provides the precompiler? User? So you need to make the precompiler? No, you don't have to. DBMS vendor provide such a precompiler. So you may have one more question. What about C++? What about Fortran? What about the other languages? You should have precompiler for each language. Okay? The SQL will be converted to Fortran, SQL will be converted to COBOL, SQL will be converted the C language, SQL will be converted to C++ for each language, respectively. Okay? So pre-compiling, then you can compile. So two steps, pre-compile and compile. That is embedded command. As you can see, it's a little bit complicated. Okay? Sometimes you don't know which one is the error. So, to address that problem, many of the DBMS provide library function. Library means it's already compiled object. Okay? Then it requires input and output. Sometimes you can provide the table name only. And it will return all the data. And sometimes you can provide condition also. Sometimes you can provide entire SQL as the input. That's it. So that is the library base. Okay? Another way to implement the procedural part, or very simple GUI part, is stored procedure. Stored procedure means why you learn the PL/SQL, right? Why is called the stored procedure.
It's already available in database management system.
Yes. When you create, did you create the PL/SQL block?
Yes.
The last? Yes. Where is it stored? DBMS. However, what about this embedded or library? Where are they? It's on the computer, not the database. However, stored procedure provides something procedural. You can implement the if then else or for loop, while loop, right? Like the very complicated the trigger, you can implement it like in your project. However, they are in the DBMS. So stored at the DBMS, you can just call that function, run the procedure in your SQL. Okay? So that is the reason it's called a stored procedure. However, it's good to blend with the SQL part. The problem is it's not very flexible with the host language, or it's not very fancy graphical user interface. Sometimes there is no graphical user interface provided. So depends on the requirement you can implement such a stored procedure. Nowadays, even the LINQ in Microsoft They hide. It's a .NET approach. They try to hide the difficulty of the using database language. They hide. So sometimes you don't know whether there is even DBMS, database. Okay? However, basically their fundamental is the exactly same as what I explained. Okay? It's a component, kind of a component for accessing the data. Don't forget, without DBMS, you can still implement the system. Without database, where can you manage and handle the data?
Files.
File, mostly memory. Okay? What happens when you run the program application? It's loaded into the memory. That's a process utilize resource of the memory. However, memory is limited, so that's the reason you need to access the file on your hard disk drive. Then if the file is too big to handle more complicated at the time, you need DBMS, database. That require different data structure. That's the overall thing. So database is not the most important subject. Okay, the more important is operating system and computer architecture and network. Such a basic stuff are required. That is the reason I have asked a lot of time. I'd like to be a database administrator. I'd like to be the good, best the database programmer. What do I need to do right now to get a better job? Because you know that if you check the monster.com or the careerbuilder.com, the pay or salary of the database related job is much higher than the developer, right? Sometimes it's more than 6 digits. So for entry level, if you have the experience, it's not entry level, whatever. So, however, at that time, I do not answer like you should learn this textbook database. No, before that, you should have the knowledge on basic computer science subject. Okay, that is the reason. Without understanding such a basic mechanism, how can you resolve the problem when you have something, the disconnectivity or whatever? So that's the basic of the database programming approach. So, for example, embedded SQL. So it's a traditional way. The proceed is sometimes called the proceed. It's a C plus a SQL. And COBOL plus. So do you know the COBOL? Have you ever used the COBOL language? If you know, I definitely guarantee you can get a job easily. Still, a lot of our systems use the COBOL language, but not many developers, not many people knows how to compile, how to use COBOL. There exists a lot of systems. So later you can use the database, Oracle database with the COBOL language. Or SQL in Java also provide the embedded SQL. API is the library that can handle you don't have to precompile in case of API. It's just a library you can include on your class path, or you can include the shared library on your main function like this one. PL/SQL is included in the DBMS. This is an example of the embedded SQL. This part is embedded. SQL statement, like this one. Microsoft provide the API very not nice but the convenient way to utilize a database, such as ODBC. ODBC is a for connection. Even connection is not simple because in your program, so if you execute this one, the instruction, set of instruction, executable file will be loaded into the memory, then call the instruction by instruction. However, in case you need to access the data, database is different. The data is in the different application program. It's a DBMS system. Okay? So it's a very complicated. Even you need to, database require some username, password. You have the Oracle username, Oracle password, and connect string, right? So this is very complicated. To simplify such a database connection, even Microsoft provide the open database connectivity. It's common the component to set up such a database connection. So when you are using so first you can set up the connection for the Oracle database, Sybase database, ABC database. Even you can set up the ODBC for the Excel file. So you can select the data on the Excel file in Microsoft family product. And in your program, you can you can use such a connected data as a component. You can just call the component, you can call the library. And this is a more advanced approach provided by the Microsoft. I'm not going to explain details about it. I don't know even some of them because it's getting the simplified. They try to hide, encapsulate the fundamental of the database. So if you focus on directly, so for example, advanced database object, without knowledge of the database, sometimes when you encounter basic problem, you can not resolve such a thing. So that's the reason I want my student focus on such a basic level of the concept. Java API, also JDBC. I think many of you guys already heard about the JDBC. JDBC is the library. Somebody already compiled to connect to access the data on the relational database using Java. So they compile and they provide the Java library. That is the JDBC driver. That's called the driver. Driver does not mean the real screwdriver. It's the set of library. It's a compiled programming. So you can just call the library. So using the JDBC. There are two types of the JDBC driver. One is from the Sun Java group. Right now it belongs to Oracle. So, however, it was the Sun Java group. It's the open source. The community, they provide the common database connectivity library with the Java. That is called the JDBC. Also, each vendor provides their own library. Impedance mismatch means, as we discussed before, data on the memory. It's a traditional way. Data on the relational database model. Their data structure are totally different. They cannot be blended. They cannot be mixed. Okay? That causes the impedance mismatch. To address that problem, we need to do some embedded programming or library approach or the API approach. So basically, what is the basic concept of a relational database model? We regard the data as what? Table is a set. In other words, group. We regard data as a group. That's actually, it seems to be very simple. What's the problem? So data is a set, but any program language, any data structure, we never consider data as a group. Data is just data. Okay? Sometimes we can extend the data as array, then vector, or some other list in Java, but we never basically fundamentally consider data as a group. That is the new idea. It's huge idea. So we adapt that idea to relational model. However, any program language, they cannot use data as a group. It's a record by record, sometimes item by item. So that is the impedance mismatch. Because of that, we cannot make the simple programming interface. So we need to do something embedded or whatever. So for the database programming, any database programming, it can be the including embedded, including the API, and whatever, we need to connect. Because database require authentication, so we need to connect to the database. That's the first thing. So when you are doing the second project B, first you should be able to connect the database. You need to implement username, password, and just like as you logged in the Oracle database using SQL Server, your project should be able to log in to the database. Then, after login, submit the query, SQL. Then, return the result, then close. Terminate the database section. Then, move to the next one. What if you do not terminate the session? It's a waste of resource. Database connection is, that means it's creating new process. That process requires a lot of resources, especially the memory. Also, that may cause the data consistency problem. So she connect the database, open the connection to the database, then modify the data. Then she didn't close the door connection. Then I try to access this data. This data is still before, sometimes after data. We cannot guarantee the data. It's a consistency problem. So you need to close. So open, connect the database, and submit the query, then close, terminate. So first embedded the SQL. So we can make such a block of the SQL. So this part is only for database part. The others are host language. So during the pre-compiling, this part will be converted into the host language, and you can finally compile. For example, for the connection, it has the connection and so on. This part is a C language. However, EXEC SQL begin, EXEC SQL end, or sometimes it's a EXEC SQL and end. This part is a database. SQL part. So this part should be compiled first. Then you can do the while loop, whatever. There's one more concept. This is a cursor. As I explained just before, host language and database language are totally different. They cannot be mixed. Database considers data as a group. However, the host language considers data as a record, just the data itself. Then how can we address that problem? So we will create, actually not me, the DBMS will create a cursor. Cursor is kind of a room, like this one. Where? Memory. So in the memory, reserve the room. Then, for example, in the previous begin EXEC and EXEC SQL part, select the data. Then output of the data is data at, there is a group of the data, right? Then result will be stored in the cursor, temporary room first. It's organized by line, just like the database concept. Then, in the programming part, for example, while loop, it can fetch. It's called a fetch. Get the first data. Data by record from the temporary room. So cursor is one important factor. How many cursor, how many temporary room do you need in your database system? That's also a very important one. Not many DBA, database administrators, know the importance of the cursor. So cursor is kind of temporary room between relational database and host language. Okay? When you close, before you close the database connection, you need to close the cursor because memory is limited. So if you still remain, the cursor is a waste of memory. Another concept of the database is the dynamic SQL. For example, let's go back to this one. So I need to select data from test where this condition. Then this one will be used for first language. Okay? However, when depending on who execute this one, in my case, the name is equal to Lee. However, sometimes someone does not know their last name, instead ID. So this one should be changed, where ID equal 111. What happened? Can I run this one? Definitely no. We need to modify the source code and compile, precompile, and compile and run it again. That doesn't make sense in real system. Condition is changed dynamically, but SQL is static. So we need to compile whenever the SQL is changed. To address that problem, why don't we make the dynamic SQL to satisfy with the dynamically changed input condition? So instead of such a SQL, static SQL, we will assemble the SQL statement, which is called the dynamic SQL. For example,